I was thinking about, guns and gun rights. And I think I realized something when you first start buying guns and getting into it. You realize we're totally desensitized to cars. I know cars aren't created for the purpose of killing people. So I get that part of the left's argument. Cars are dangerous. Cars kill a lot of people very, 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 very often. And I think about how we walk through busy streets. You go to New York and like somebody will just walk through a busy street as cars are flying past them because they know people will use their brakes. Why don't they have that same level of trust in somebody walking down the street with a gun?
That's a really good point.
I know. And I've seen kids, they're just like arrogantly walking the street and the car will slow down and start honking at them angrily. Mm-hmm. Or look at the Antifa people who go around surrounding cars and smashing them. They know no one's going to do anything to them. Yet when it comes to guns, the assumption is that like every law-abiding citizen will just go nuts and start shooting randomly.
I think because guns are unique, they're not transport vehicles. Like their only job is to fire a bullet, basically, which is basically a killing tool.
It's not necessarily true. You can also consider them a deterrent. If you see somebody with a gun, you're not going to mess with them.
But I see your point, Ian. But what I'm saying is, don't you trust people?
Kind of, dude. Sometimes I drive down the road and I'm like, whoa, okay.
No, for sure.
2 tons of metal going past each other 120 miles an hour, calculated, both 60 in each direction. And we're just trusting that neither one of us is going to.
It's amazing, isn't it? Think about this. Yeah. I'm driving down a West Virginia road and it's like 55-mile limit. And there's a thin yellow paint strip in the middle of the road to stop me and another car, which is like 2 feet from me, from slamming in with the full force of 110 miles an hour. And I was just mutating and vaporizing.
To answer your question, yeah, I trust people on like explicitly.
I don't. I'm constantly holding the I don't know. I call it the O-S-H word.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call it the O-S
no, but
bar.
like, that's what I realized when I would walk around West Virginia. I see those people with guns all the time. And I'm just like, I'm not worried about any of these people doing anything to me because I'm not worried about cars either.
So you're becoming desensitized to it because I bet if people had never seen a car and they were first time, they'd be terrified.
Yep. Yeah. Like, it's coming right for me.
But since we're like 2 or 3, they're like, what? Look both ways at the car. I mean, in the very beginning, we were probably terrified of the noise, of the speed. And you just get used to it.
It's trust, man. Regular people are all right. But guess what? Sometimes people ram cars into people. Like we see these videos, man. And there's some really awful instances that have happened to that van thing in Europe. So we've just become so accustomed and desensitized to the fact that regular people just want to live their lives. Sometimes people drink and drive.
I think a lot of it is situational too, though. When I lived in DC, when I heard gunshots, I would get scared and I would contemplate calling the police or going to look if there's somebody dying outside. When I hear gunshots in West Virginia, we all say it sounds like freedom because you know that it's just one of your neighbors doing target practice in the yard.
Yeah.
So it's different.
Think about it this way. If you are in an area where guns are and you know what people are doing with the guns, you're not worried.
Right.
People they're shooting at the range down by in the mountain, shooting at with a really great backstop. And if you're in a big city and you hear car noises, you're fine. Now imagine this. You're in the middle of nowhere on top of a mountain. There's no roads anywhere for 15 miles and you hear cars driving around. What? You're going to freak out.
Right.
Like if you're in your cabin in the woods on your property, it's 20 acres or something in the middle of nowhere, or you're on some resort and you hear cars driving around and there's no roads, you'll probably wake up what is going on? You'll freak out. Imagine if you were, vacationing somewhere in a private community and then you hear a weird noise that doesn't belong. Doesn't matter if it's a car or otherwise. Same thing is true for guns. When you're in DC and the only reason people are shooting is because they're criminals, it's going to freak you out.
Yeah. I mean, and it's weird because it's kind of backwards for me now. I live on a dead end road. So when I hear cars, I get freaked out. Right. But when I hear gunshots, I'm like, oh, it's just, the neighbors. Even my liberal neighbors will sit on their front lawn. We have one semi-liberal house in the community. And even they sit out there and they'll shoot off their porch and stuff. And so
that's liberal to you.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably libertarian, but whatever. They're more left than the majority of people on our street. But when I hear a car go by, I'm always like, what the heck is that? And then I'm like, oh, it's just the dump truck. But we don't even have mail that comes to the house because I'm so far out there.
Yeah.
So when a car comes up, I'm like, oh, who the heck? What's going on? But when I hear gunshots, I'm just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was walking through this area in West Virginia and I heard gunshots going off, and I'm like, I gotta find out where those are, and I'm walking towards the sound.
Oh my God.
You know why? Because the people who are there shooting aren't insane people. They're not shooting randomly into the woods, and it's not hunting season. So I know that as long as, you know, if I'm going to make my way to these people, I know that they're probably target shooting because I was told specifically by a store that they do target shooting. I'm hearing this, then I know they're very, very likely practicing safety, and I'm not worried about them. It's just like when I'm crossing the street, I'm not worried about a car crashing into me. I know that I see the car. I don't try making cars brake for me when I cross the street. You know what I mean? Like if you have a crosswalk, I'll try to like run across quickly, but I'm not worried they're going to slam the gas on and try and, you know, steer into me. I know it's not going to happen. They don't want to do that. So when I hear shots in the middle of nowhere and I know there's a range nearby, I'm like, I'm not worried that someone's going to have an accidental discharge. These people are at a range. They're shooting. I'm going to keep following the noise. And then I ended up finding the range, and there was a guy, an older guy, and he was, you know, zeroing in his sights for his, you know, hunting rifle of some sort. And I was like, hey, howdy. And he's like, hey, how's it going? He's like, oh, we're about done here. It's all yours. And I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's regular people.
So are you guys familiar with the story of Switzerland and how they do their guns?
No.
I was reading about them, and they start to train their kids to shoot when they're very young. This is culturally acceptable. They go to these shooting clubs. Boys, it used to be a boys only thing. Now boys and girls do it. From my understanding, they did have like a mandatory military service. Everyone has a gun. 0 murder rates. Everyone treats them responsibly. And I caught a little bit of heat on Twitter for saying this, but I think that guns should be viewed not as a toy, but as something that is fun and recreational, worthy of respect, a tool, something important that we need to understand and like really grasp. I think that's what we're missing. We need to make it like a cultural norm for guns to be acceptable. Because if we don't, they're just going to be terrifying, and only bad people are going to have them.
We're getting dull. Like dull in color and dull in sharpness.
Yep.
People used to die all the time. It was crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah, people would have like 10 kids because half of them would die.
I was just telling you guys about that siege in Crete, where it was a 21-year siege where kids were born into this city that was under siege, and till 21, and they would dig tunnels. I mean, their life was they would go under in tunnels. They couldn't see a guy from me to you, and they'd have knives or like bats and try and kill each other in these tunnels and lay mines and I mean, it's just
sounds horrible, dude.
Horrible. This was like 500 years ago.
I'm glad we don't do that anymore.
I know, and thank God. But like, if we're not careful, it could degrade back to that. Like, that's why I'm studying this stuff. Like, how do we survive if society collapses? Oh, you build mines under the opposing fence, and then you let.
Yikes!
It's crazy, dude. And like tunnel rats in Vietnam, they would climb down into the mud and climb in this like the suffocation was a constant threat. Just the terror and horror of war, and we have grown soft to that stuff.
To everything,
luckily,
though. So it's like what's happening now is. These cultists are coming in, they're taking over, and it's a really weird thing. Like, I don't understand this weird overlap between the liberals, the left, and wokeness, because there are a bunch of hard leftists like DSA. They're as woke can be, to the point where it's actually horrifying. Like that video where the guy's like, "Hello, my name's Toby, he, him. I just like to say, point of privilege. The chatter in this room is really making it hard for me to focus. Everybody, guys, you need to calm down." And the other person goes, "Stop saying guys and don't." And I'm like, this is just lunacy. They couldn't even have a cohesive meeting, you know. So I'm wondering, where's that? Then there's like the dirtbag left that are pro-gun, anti-woke, and just socialists. So I'm like, what's this overlap? So are these cultists? Are they socialists, the people who are coming in doing critical race theory in these schools? Or are they just woke cultists? You know what I mean?
They're like
or is there an
opportunists. Yeah.
I mean, I think they're Marxists.
So they're like all about redistribution of the means of production, or what?
Yeah, and they're also on a power trip. A lot of this, I think, isn't even political necessarily. I think that some people got bullied in high school, and now they want to get back at the world by bullying everybody else. I honestly think that a lot of it is not political. I think that it's just power.
It's a cult.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Power,
and that's what I was saying earlier. It's like the rules don't exist. They change on a whim, because the real goal is that the real issue is that there is a chaotic, destructive force that just seeks to infect and destroy, and it has no real goals. Like, think about what the woke stuff is doing. What is it doing? It's
vengeance.
Destroying businesses.
Yeah, it's all
It's
revenge.
corroding culture and destroying enterprise and business.
People want to be avengers in real life. They want to avenge their past torture from being bullied. I know, because I went through it in 2006. I started making YouTube videos. I was like, wow, if I want to destroy anyone right now, I could get a crowd of people to go destroy their lives. Not physically, but just basically it was pre-cancel culture, pre-docs, pre-all that stuff. But I realized how powerful it was, this ostracization and how humiliation of people I could use. Because I had like 10,000 people would watch, and I'd be like, call this guy on this day. Everyone call him at this time and let him know this information. And then let's do it again tomorrow. And like the power of the crowd, horrifying. It was. And I didn't allow myself to fall. Thank God.
Think about it this way. You said the Avengers. Marvel movies were amazing. Making tons of money. Everybody really likes them. And they started getting a little woke. And then people started complaining a little bit. You know, Black Panther got some heat, which I don't think was entirely undeserved, but I like Black Panther. I give it a 7 out of 10. Captain Marvel got roasted, and it absolutely deserved it. Now, they all made a ton of money. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, that was the biggest cultural institution we had in film. Like, the Marvel movies each movie's over $1 billion. Endgame was like the biggest movie for a while. I guess Avatar got re-released. And then they infect it with this cult that starts just destroying what makes it interesting. Then you start seeing, some of the movies that come out are not as good, and the writing gets a little weaker. And it's like eating at the base of what makes things fun and interesting and slowly eroding and destroying them. It creates nothing. It does nothing. That's why I think Marxism makes sense. These people want to completely destroy what culture there is to create a new one. Yeah. They want to erase it first. So they're not producing anything. They're going to just destroy everything, and then from the ashes, they will try to build anew.
I'm not familiar enough with Marxism. Like communism, like China is like a pseudo or like a neo-communist. It's not a real communist. It's like a capitalist.
It's just totalitarianism.
Yeah, it's a weird like amalgamation of communism and capitalism, and so there probably is a new word for it. Maybe what these people are doing is a new word for like a neo-Marxism.
I would say it's fair to say real communism has never been tried. And then you must add the caveat to that, because every single time someone does try to do, or I'm sorry, no, that's wrong. Real communism has never been implemented. And the issue is that every time real communism is tried, they end up just killing tons and tons of people, millions of people. And so that says to me that every single time you try, you will not be able to successfully implement your utopian vision of full-on communism.
It's a feature.
Yeah, well, so the general idea these people have, and that's why they don't believe, they ignore the history, is they're like, gotta keep trying. They have this magic view that we're all gonna live in a utopia, that we're all just gonna be holding hands and singing under a rainbow, and then everyone will own everything, and it's just garbage nonsense fairy tales. So then someone says, I'm gonna try and do it. Hello, good Sir Ian. I'm going to make a communist utopia as we've all dreamed. Would you like to join? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Cassandra, would you like to join my communist utopia?
Sure.
You would. Lydia, would you?
Yeah, sure.
Congratulations. None of you have to die.
Wait, I'm having second thoughts.
Oh, I've got a Glock 9mm here.
Not about this. Oh, it's too late.
Now there's no one left to oppose my utopian vision. That's exactly what happens every time. It doesn't work because people say 2 words. I disagree. Well, I'm going to have to kill you, I guess.
That's essentially what they're doing to people, like, digitally now. They're making it so people can't get jobs. They can't get bank accounts. I mean, they're effectively, like, trying to kill people.
But that's why it just becomes authoritarianism.
Yeah.
You call it fascism if you want, and the left says, well, fascism is actually, I don't care what you want to call it.
Doesn't matter.
It's a bunch of psychopathic, violent morons who are going to destroy everything because they want power. They're not smart enough to make a machine work, so they're going to throw a wrench in it.
You need some authority, like obviously at a local level of authority. You need a sheriff. Maybe you don't need a sheriff these days, but seems like you need a local order.
Sheriffs
but top-down authority is very dangerous. That's the path. That's the lesson I've learned.
I was talking to this anarchist dude about how in like Acapulco, is it?
Acapulco?
Not Anarchapulco, just like
Acapulco.
Yeah. It's very anarchistic, and that's what they do, Anarchapulco. And I was like, this guy's telling me, he's like, look, where I live, there's no government, there's no police, there's no law, and everyone gets along just fine. And I was like, so what would happen if you like walked into your neighbor's house and took his stuff? He's like, oh, he'd probably shoot me. I'm like, oh, because you have a general understanding about what is and isn't acceptable, right? Of course, that's how people work. And I was like, listen. The general understanding of what is or isn't acceptable is the basic formation of government between people, a social order that exists. So you're not in, okay, fine, I get it. You call it anarchy, and there's no authority. So an without archy authority, that I understand. But there is government. People are armed, And so let me ask you another question. If someone comes into your house and takes your stuff, would your neighbors help you stop that person? Yes. Congratulations. You formed a small government that there's no exchange of currency. You just agree. We live here. We're in charge. And if someone comes and tries to take from us, we're going to use force against them. Scale that up and you get more and more government. So it's really simple to start creating government. And then you take a look at these small anarchist communities. And it's no surprise that over time, as more and more people move in, government becomes more and more overbearing. So I actually was thinking about this in terms of science. And I feel like it's basically following a similar principle to the state of matter. So I think about it this way. You have gas. Particles are far apart, bouncing around all crazy. And so it makes this, the gas can be, moved and shifted about and you can whiff through it and all that stuff. As you start to compress that into a tighter and tighter space, it becomes liquid. Now it's harder to move through. And then if you compress it even further, it becomes a solid. Now you can't move through it at all. That's basically how I view government. If you have a bunch of people all separated, then they have these big bubbles of inherent of personal freedom where they can do whatever they want. We can go outside and launch our remote control car 50 feet up in the air and then laugh as it smashes into the ground. You can't do that in New York. They'll come and get angry. Because the closer people get together, it starts becoming rigid like solid matter. People's rights get compressed as more and more people emerge around them. And then big cities start pushing totalitarian and despotic rules and laws. Can't have guns anymore. You can't play loud music. You can't, play instruments in your own home. You can't go out at certain points. Oh no, there's a pandemic. Now everyone's got to get shots. Now everyone's got to get vaccine passports. Then you go to the mountain where everyone's separated. Life's normal.
Yeah.
Make it totally free.
We're also unincorporated too, so we don't even have like that much government really. I mean, obviously we have like state and county and stuff, but we don't. I mean, people will be in our group chat being like, hey, is this legal? And people will respond and be like, is somebody going to die? And then they'll be like, no. And they're like, okay, then do it. What do we like? Nobody cares. I mean,
that's so we had a conversation about guns with Luke. And we were talking about how like in New York City, for instance, it's like almost impossible to have a gun. And then you get all these liberals being like, why would anyone need an AR-15? And it's like, you're not even saying anything when you say that because there's so many different variants and like calibers and modifications. Just like, you don't know what you're talking about. But I mentioned, it's probably not a good idea for someone to have a .308, rifle for home defense in a studio condo in New York City because that bullet's going to rip through walls and maybe hit somebody. And then Luke instinctively said, maybe we restrict. And I was like, oh, up. You're trying. No. The point is, maybe the individual is responsible for whatever comes out of the barrel of that gun. And if they do have a .308 in their home, they should know better than firing it because it's going to go through walls. And if they hit somebody, that's negligent homicide because you are the individual responsible for that weapon. You should be allowed to have it. But if you shoot it, you're going to get arrested when someone gets hit or for the vandalism and damage you caused by doing it. Same as if you had a car and you drove onto private property, you're in trouble. Same if you had a car and you were speeding and you hit somebody. You're legally allowed to have a car. You're not legally allowed to crash that car into someone's storefront. So I'm like, that's the idea of individual responsibility in big cities. You can still have that freedom. It's just your responsibility.
I really like this metaphor of states of matter in government, like constriction, like pressure, because beyond, so maybe we're in the fluidic state. It's either liquid or gas. There's resistance when you move. The government is the resistance. You can kind of push through it. There's wind resistance. You hit terminal velocity. But once you get even more spacious than gas, you turn into plasma, which is the fourth state of matter, which is like there is no wind resistance in a plasma
People are
state.
running around firing rockets in their backyards.
It's electromagnetic. Yeah, what is it like?
Like plasma is the fourth state of matter. I would liken that to living literally in, 100 square miles of desert with no one around you.
Utopia.
You could just take a dump right there.
With access to
Like
whatever
no one-
you need. Like
the only-
electrons can appear in different places within the cloud.
Okay, no, I don't know about that.
Or like matter formation.
I'm just talking about the closer people come together, their rights start compressing, and it becomes totalitarian, like a rigid, solid state
And
of matter.
if you need to import resources, that's bringing people closer together. So if you don't need to import resources and you can create them on the spot, you could take a dump in the desert. You can create your water and your food.
The fourth state of
That's where we're headed.
The fourth state of this analogy is that you're in the middle of the woods on this massive 200-acre plot of land you own, and there's no one who's allowed on your property, and you take a dump right there in an open field, and the only one you bothered is the guy in the space station who's looking down with his, satellite telescope, whatever, and he's like,
Posting it to Instagram.
You know, he's like, that's so gross. Or he laughs and he's like, legit.
If people had lots of space and could create all their materials on source, like at location, I think that we would not really need government.
Dude,
not like this.
You could have in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there still is population density of the planet, which means you can't, build nuclear weapons and stuff because you'll interfere with them at a greater distance. But think about like your range of effect when it comes to your rights. If you live in a tiny cubicle apartment in New York, you can't play the drums, man, because you're going to have 10 people being like, dude, come on, man. It's not fair to us.
I know that firsthand.
Right.
It's sad.
And so you're like, I have a right to be noisy between these hours. And it's true, but it's kind of a dick move. People might gotta sleep, they might got a night shift. So it's not necessarily just about law, it's about social enforcement. Now you live in the middle of nowhere, 200 acres, you're right in the middle. You could literally pull out, just watch Hickok 45. The dude just goes nuts. I watched the video, I was tweeting about the KSG 25. Dude loads KSG 25 with slugs. It's a tactical shotgun that holds 25 shotgun shells. And he's just going boom, boom, like crazy, just shooting shotgun slugs like nuts. Because there's nobody around him.
And if you had your own planet, you could set off nukes all over the planet and no one would care.
Exactly. That's the plasma. You have your own planet, like Dr. Manhattan, and he builds a gigantic weird structure and he floats around doing whatever he wants because he got no one to bother.
And that's literally, you could light off nukes and no one would care.
Well, let's
it wouldn't be concerned.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.